Well, it's 8:15. It's April 11th, and it's time to open our PUD regular meeting. And the first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's like a round there. Yeah, it's weird.
So the next item on our agenda is to approve the agenda. Are there any comments or changes to the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, well, the next item is our consent agenda, and it's the minutes of the regular meeting and the claims for April 11th. Is there any discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Great, the motion carries. Let's move on to public comment. Is there anybody in the room who'd like to speak first?
We don't have any here.
All right, and then let's check online. I don't see any hands raised.
I think we're clear there as well.
Great. Well, we have a second public comment period at the end. So let's move on to old business. So the two items under old business are the broadband update and the adjudication update.
So I'll start off on the broadband update, just to say that we're still working on the digital equity, and I'm going to kick over to Andrew to talk more about that. And we did just see an announcement, or we got an announcement last week from the Washington State Broadband Board that they're now looking at the end of April for an award date. Keep you posted. They haven't made one of these deadlines yet. Eventually they will. I mean, they'll say we'll get it done at some point and it'll happen. But I don't know if this is that time. So Andrew, you want to take it away?
Sure. Good morning, commissioners, Chris, John. That's right. We're continuing to stay engaged with Senator Cantwell's office as well as Washington State University. They both hold a series or host a series of digital equity meetings, and the WSU is bi-weekly. And so that's really helpful because they go through the worksheets that each county is being asked to fill out a WSU broadband worksheet to compile digital equity needs across the county. And we'll submit that up to the state broadband office, who has hired a consultant to compile everyone's digital equity efforts and planning efforts. And they'll submit one big cohesive digital equity plan back up to the federal government to get digital equity dollars. And those will be additional dollars aside from the infrastructure dollars that we've been talking a lot about. So more to come on that. But we've been working with the Port of Ellingham to fill out each of those worksheets one by one, and lots of stakeholder engagement and getting everyone or everyone that we can to who's associated with each of the individual worksheets to be represented. So that's moving along just fine. To Chris's point, we have not heard anything yet from the state broadband office on our projects, but they did host a statewide kind of kickoff to announce the BEAD program, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, about a week and a half ago. And that was a wealth of information, especially if you haven't been tracking the BEAD or those federal programs. And they informed the group about a handful of consultants who are available if you are a community who may not have resources. So we're feeling really good. We're feeling, I think myself and our friends over at the port are feeling really, really good about where we are with the funding. What else? The port's challenge process, you might might know from recent updates that the Port of Bellingham had a challenge on their project. So we met with the state broadband office, the port, of course, and then Ziply, who was challenging a portion of their project. And we agreed, or the port agreed, that they would remove the areas that Ziply was challenging. So those address points will come out. Ziply's already made an investment in those areas, and we did some field work to fact check that, and it was in fact true. So it was a good meeting overall, and we'll see how all of our projects score. But I was hoping to hear a little bit of an update at that meeting, which was just at the end of last week, on when the announcements will be made. But to Chris's point, no new information there. That's what I have. Back to you, Chris.
That's all I have new. Are there any questions?
I have
Yeah.
a question.
Thank you. Go ahead.
When we're talking about, you're engaging with Cantwell's office and Wazoo on equity, how are we defining equity? Like, what specifically are they addressing? Is it pockets of people that have no access to broadband? Is it low income families that are having difficulty accessing any type of internet? Like, what does that look like?
Well, let me clarify one thing first. Our interactions with Senator Cantwell's office have largely been around the RDOF areas and whether or not the incumbents who succeeded in those bids are actually going to serve those areas.
Okay.
So it's not really, it's kind of a digital equity issue in that they're unserved.
Sure.
But the issue there really is, when is the ISP going to do what they said they're going to do? And Senator Cantwell's office has been helping bring us together with, in this case, it was Ziply, and get some long-term plans from them, and kind of pin down, get some accountability in that whole part of it. So
Okay.
the Cantwell issue is aside from digital equity.
Gotcha.
But, I'm gonna defer to Andrew. I could talk for a long time about digital equity. I know a lot about it, but he's actually hands-on preparing some of the information. Andrew?
Sure. WSU has well, let me back up. Under the BEAD program, they've identified covered populations, which include like low income area folks, people who with a disability, veterans, and then the state broadband office added some additional covered populations under the digital equity umbrella, which are like youth and foster care or youth in foster care and some of those. So that's the idea behind the equity. They've identified groups of populations that we're trying to find organizations that work or touch with those folks, and how do we get them resources like computers, or if maybe they have access to their to broadband, but it's not affordable. So getting them to know about federal support programs like the Affordable Connectivity Program, where they get a discount on their internet bill. So as a utility, we primarily and historically just focus on the infrastructure, and that's where we've dedicated our time. So this digital equity piece is we're really relying on stakeholders who are already there, like libraries, for example. They've been working with these folks who need computers and internet access for years. And so they have lots of good resources that they're bringing to the table. So we're starting to engage with them and again, other organizations like the Goodwill and folks are just doing really good work in the community that we may not know about because we've just been working on infrastructure for such a long time.
And then we're using the digital equity information to help us kind of rank our infrastructure projects. So, all other things being equal, if you can get to a larger disadvantaged population with this project than this project, you want to pick project A.
Sure.
And so we're using it to help rank those just from an infrastructure point of view. But to Andrew's point, there's a whole lot more to it than that. Some of it we're not involved with, but we can help kind of be the catalyst.
Thank you.
Commissioner Grant, do you have any questions?
I just had a question about the WPUD telecom workshop in May and who is planning to attend. Okay, all right.
And the general manager's meeting is the next day.
Oh, perfect.
So I'll be there
Okay.
for both those.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm planning to attend. I haven't committed to attend yet. So do you have any interest in attending, Commissioner Grant?
I don't think I can pull it off. I've got two trips to the Tri-Cities for, yeah, I don't think I can pull it off.
Oh, for
But I
Energy
want
North.
to make sure, yeah, I want to make sure we have somebody there.
Yeah, I'll be there for
Okay.
sure.
Great, thanks for bringing it up. So I have two comments, questions for Andrew. First is to understand better the intersection. And I think all the commissioners have been exposed to the Whatcom PUD digital equity plan document that Andrew's put together. If not, there's some mapping tools that Andrew and I assume others, you've got support from others in doing that. But anyway, you shared that with me, Andrew, and I found it to be very informative about how the geography of digital equity maps out in the county. What I'm interested in understanding is what is the intersection of the digital equity opportunity and the planned direct involvement of the PUD and the port. When I say direct involvement, certainly our prior and current focus as far as applying for funding has been to go after those that are unserved. But I want to understand, is the digital equity opening a door for us to go after some people that are underserved? And if, what is the area where we're identifying gaps, which I mean the port and the PUD together, are not currently biased to fill? So maybe asking that question again, what are the gaps in coverage that we're identifying that we are unlikely, based on our current policy and approach, to fill?
So, I mean, from a real high level, Atul, we're not sure how they're going to make these awards. So until we see what the criteria are, we don't really have a good handle on what the opportunities are going to be. And it may be that, you know, it's not infrastructure related at all, in which case it really wouldn't be a target, I think, of the PUD and the port. And then it would be more of, you know, who do we kick it to in the county or the cities, or, you know, who'd be the more appropriate agency to handle whatever it is. But again, I'm not really sure that we can say, because we don't know how they're going to make awards to begin with right now. You know, we got to kind of see what their notice of funding opportunity, or NOFO. We need to see what their NOFO looks like after we get the BEAD allocation, and you know, then we'll have a better idea of where we fit. Andrew?
I think that's right. I mean, we're still trying to, well, the FCC is working with a consultant, CostQuest, we're still trying to identify all of the address points that can be served under BEAD. So we're still in the preliminary phase. And to Chris's point, once we have the NOFO from the state, then we'll know more of the sideboards. But we're doing everything we can in preparation for what we think is going to come, but that will be adjusted slightly or maybe significantly, depending on what comes out. But I know at the very kind of granular level, we're still trying to map each and every household or business that can receive BEAD funding, and that's a national mapping effort being undertaken right now. And I know the state submitted a massive bulk request to get some address points updated for the state, so we should hear back soon. So that's kind of the first step. That's what I know.
So broadband is thank you, Andrew. Broadband is a new venture for local government, and I mean relatively still a new venture for local government. It makes sense that we focused on the areas where there was very little debate about coverage and building infrastructure, which is again the unserved. As we get into this digital equity discussion, I think we can expect a lot more potentially confusion based on who decide different opinions on the level that people have as far as service. And in addition, in cases, just plain old friction, because it's presenting some degree of competitive threat to existing internet service providers. So it's just something to, for me to reflect on. The other thing I wanted to share is mostly an update to the commission. At our last commission meeting, I mentioned that I was going to bring up with Wapuda this week. And I've got on the agenda, I talked to Angela at the telecom committee to bring up the expo for NOAA to consider and explore the possibility of providing a retail ISP, public retail ISP function for the public utilities community. I just wanted to repeat again that I plan to raise that at the telecom meeting and see what the community of PUDs think about it. That's all I have on this.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing about how that goes.
If there's no more on this, is there any more on this agenda item?
Oh, I have nothing else for you. Andrew's shaking his head.
Yeah,
Nope.
thanks. Thanks for the updates. So moving on to the other update, of course, is adjudication.
I'll take that. Just as you may be aware, over the weekend, the President of the Senate signed HB 1792, the adjudication bill we worked on. The House Speaker had signed on Friday, so it's moving on to the governor's desk. I don't have an estimate of when he'll look at the bill for signature, but there's been no opposition, and so it's looking positive. I have not had an update on any reconciliation of the budget proviso, so I think that's still working through that process of the budget. So that's all I really have to report today. I anticipate a short executive session at the next meeting to talk about some interim steps, and then we may have a more in-depth executive session later in the summer with our legal water right team. And that's all I have at this time.
Thank you.
Is there any comments from the commission?
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's getting there.
Yeah, for me, John, I wanted to thank you for the binder. It really ensured that I didn't have any trouble getting to sleep. this
Yeah,
week.
there you go. I always tell law students, I said, the one thing about law books or these kind of memos is they're covered with chloroform, so you can help you sleep.
No, but I did actually take the time to look at quite a bit of the content in there. I really noticed the difference in tone and approach of our new legal counsel as opposed to our prior legal counsel, and I find they're very complementary approaches, and I really feel good about how much bench we have in terms of our understanding of the legal and water related issues as an organization. And of course, that's decades of work on part of many people. So I just want to, and the binder really communicates that depth of knowledge and bench. I asked Chris to see if we could find a book, by the way. I don't know, Chris, if you guys, I just asked for it the other day.
Yeah, we do not have a copy of it. And until I've done a bit of research, it only deals with water law in New Mexico. It's got nothing to do with the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. I'm not sure. It might be a useful analog, but yeah, we can talk about that later. Okay, so let's move on
I'll just say that when we have our more extensive executive session update sometime later this summer, we'll have folks from Tupper Mac Wells here. And that'll be probably a work session of a few hours. But we'll work with you on scheduling that later.
Okay.
Great. Let's move on to new business. So the first item is I think a minor item, approval of resolution number 830, a cancellation of a warrant.
I believe that's either Annette or Tracy.
It's me.
It's Tracy.
Good morning. This was just a check or an invoice we got from Whatcom Land Title that once we paid it, they returned the check because PSE, Pacific Survey and Engineering, paid it. So they'll bill us for it. So it's just cancellation, no reissue.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 830.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries aye.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you, Tracy. And I guess I just want to quickly mention, because it's not on the agenda, the change orders and the really nothing new. The only item that was new there, relatively new, was an item we approved in our last commission meeting, correct, Chris? Which was a variable speed drive,
I think that's the latest thing that's on the change order list, yeah.
but the commission already discussed and approved that.
Yep,
All right.
but we're
let's-
tracking all these change orders and giving it to you as monthly, so you've got some visibility into the whole
No, I
process.
find that, again, that's a process change we implemented a year or so ago, and I love it. It's great. And the fine tuning that you guys have done on it also makes it easier to, the report easy to follow and review. So let's move on to the Wire One survey questions.
So let me make a few introductory comments and go over some background information so that everybody's at the same place. The Wire One management team had a 5-year work plan in place. It was called phase 2 of the Wire One team. And that really spelled out the scope of work that the team has been engaged in for the last 5 years. It ends at the end of this year. And so the team is looking forward, kind of what next? And some of it is just a logical extension of what we're already working on. Do more, more studies on riparian habitat restoration, et cetera, et cetera. There's a ton of stuff in there. And some of it is, well, should we do something different? And so the last time the team met, the question came up, well, should we do anything different? And Becky Peterson wrote a questionnaire. What I want to do today is hand out the questionnaire. And the idea behind the questionnaire is, given what we've done, what would you like to see different? What would you like to see the same? What are the things that are most important? I'll hand all that out. But remember that all of this builds on the output of phase 2. And I want to hand out, this is a public document. We've got one of them that's a lousy copy. Just want to hand these out so that everybody's got it. We can all talk from the same page.
I have.
I got this electronically from Chris.
This is a public document, so this is not anything secret. What this is the high-level review of the plan itself. Now, the plan is a pretty dense document that was generated by an engineering firm that we've hired. And it's on the 3rd page. They have the cover page of it. RH2 is the engineering firm. So this, and I just invite you to read through it at your own leisure. It's not a, so I guess I should back up. After we go over this real briefly, I'm going to give you guys the survey itself. We'll have some discussion. I don't need an answer for the survey today. So that's why I just want to hand all this stuff out, get you thinking about it. And then next time when we meet, we're going to go over this again. If you go to the page, it says current and future water use. That kind of details what's going on today and what's gonna happen over the next 50 some odd years. So it's a pretty in-depth look at what's going on, and we believe it's very accurate with regards to domestic, municipal, and irrigation uses. Of course, the commercial use is there too, but it's vanishingly small. And then if you go 3 pages past that, you end up with a graph that says projected 2070 total runoff. This is probably, in my mind anyway, the most important graph in the entire, I think one more. That's it. That's the most important graph in the entire package. And when you look at it, this is the 50th percentile projection of runoff. That means that, they've used a meteorological model, and there's a bunch of different scenarios, and this is the middle of the road scenario. So there's going to be more extreme scenarios in any direction that you want to pick. This is the kind of the middle of the road climate scenario. And what this shows is that in June, for instance, The flow in the Nooksack will be 2,500 cubic feet a second less than the current historical average. And another way to read this is that if this scenario comes true, the Nooksack will run dry 3 or 4 months out of the year. The little yellow bars that you see, and Rick, I don't know, are you with me on the same page? Looking at this one. There you go. The little yellow bars are consumption. And we had a really great discussion on Friday afternoon with Eric Hurst, and you know, I brought this to his attention. I guess the thing that I would say is that you know, on the one hand, when you look at conserving, let's say we're able to conserve 100% of the usage of human use of water. In other words, no withdrawals from the stream. Turns out it doesn't matter. The stream runs dry. And you know, that's literally what this says. On the other hand, conservation is the opposite of waste. And I don't like waste. So, you know, kind of left with this dilemma that conservation is not the fix, but it makes everything a little bit better. And we should probably think about that. And we don't have an explicit conservation plank in our scenarios. The other thing to think about is this scenario, I believe, is somewhere around a 2 degree shift. And that would presume that China hits peak CO2 emissions sometime in 2028, 2029, which looks highly optimistic. So, you know, you're looking at perhaps a 3 degree scenario by 2100, which would be about a 2.6, 2.7 degree by 2070, which would mean that this is a conservative estimate. Now, what this shows is that there's a lot more water than what we need in the winter and a heck of a lot less in the summer. And so this points to some engineering solutions that you can use to help fix some of this stuff. Now, that being said, those engineering solutions would all violate the Foster decision. They would run afoul of all kinds of permitting, and you know, there's enormous problems with any engineered solution to this. And largely, if you look at it, you need to shift the water from the winter to the summer. So you got a time shift. That means you got to store the water somewhere. And wherever you store it, you're violating the Foster decision, and you've got enormous permitting problems. And then if you don't have it far enough upstream, the tributary that's upstream of the reservoir would run dry. And you need to kind of think through all of those things. So I'm leaving you that as background and just something to think about. And then I'm going to pass out another document which has a tool. This is a tool. The document that you have is actually 2 pages. I'm just handing out the second page. The first page is some introductory stuff.
Can you just remind me of the Foster decision? Can you do 30 seconds over? I'm getting it confused with.
There's a lot of
Okay.
cases I get confused with. I'll just
Okay.
have to go back to my notes, but in short, there was a proposal to do an out of basin transfer for mitigation of appropriation of the water rights, and the court said no, that was the overriding consideration of public interest, OCPI, that allowed some adjustments for out of basin transfers for mitigation, and ecology contested that. Well, they argued they could on a limited basis, but the courts ruled that you cannot do the out of basin transfer, which had been an underlying ecology position for some time. So ecology is now pursuing policy 2030, and which rumored to try to address the Foster decision and the out of basin transfers, but everything we're hearing from ecology at some recent conferences with PUDs and others is that it does not go 20% of the way there to resolving the out of basin transfer issues, and will just create more questions and opportunities for litigation of those issues.
So out of basin transfer, meaning moving water from one basin to
One basin to
another?
another, or it could be from the lower portion of the Nooksack to an upper portion of the
Okay.
Nooksack. So,
Or it could be from the groundwater to the surface water,
Okay.
or vice versa.
Okay.
Yeah, it's and basically the way to characterize the ruling is that you can go ahead and do a withdrawal, you know, at any time, as long as you return it in kind, in time, and in place.
yeah.
which means that the exact instant that you withdraw the water, you have to return it in an identical form. So, you know, and that's kind of the dilemma with the Foster decision. So all of the things that we've seen as engineering solutions to this run afoul of that. And that's something that we're going to have to wrestle with inside and outside of adjudication, I believe. So with that as all kind of background,
I was gonna chime in, and that's one, you hear about the table solutions table and the study being done by the county for some large space and large storage upriver that can create new water in the summer. That a lot of us feel that while that may be an engineered solution, there is no way to functionally implement that under current law and ecology and Department of Fish and Wildlife positions. So at the moment, the studies can be done from an engineering perspective, but the solution doesn't seem real, given the current status of the rules and policy interpretations. So it raises a lot of other questions about utilities and dollars at this moment, but that's for another day.
So the second document that I just handed out, they're about halfway down the page is the first of the 9 strategies that are in phase 2. So these are the strategies that I want you to look at and think about. I've been assured that future in-stream flow models are included in this, but I would urge you to think about, we should probably have something called out specifically. This in-stream flow models that we're looking at today were originated 25 years ago, and they were done at a time, decade before smartphones were invented. It was a full stop. If I could drop the mic, I would have. Yeah. So while they were excellent studies at the time, they have limitations, and they're limitations that can be overcome with modern studies, such as there are only a few cut planes. One of them down at the near our Ferndale measuring gauge doesn't study the estuary very well, for instance, doesn't have a lot of readings upstream. The readings that they made, and this is one reason why they did it this way, in order to figure out how the stream is flowing, you needed to physically get in there, measure the flow speed, estimate the cross section, and measure the temperature. And you had to do that under a single flow regime, try and catch it at numerous places. Well, they could only do it at 1 or 2 places, and that's what they did. Today, you'd send a drone out with LiDAR, and you would get 1,000 cut planes going up the river. And that's in fact what they're doing on the Skagit River today as part of the hydro relicensing. So the nature and capability of the models that exist today is radically different from what existed when the University of Utah did their groundbreaking good work to give us our original modeling. So, you know, I would urge you to think about that. I would recommend adding a plank that dealt just with that. Other than that, the 9 strategic areas look really good, and we should probably do more. I would also suggest adding a plank that talks about conservation, and that what we ought to have is kind of a no regrets approach to conservation. If we're able to conserve, it doesn't hurt, right? It may not necessarily help, because if it's agriculture that conserves, for instance, they may just redirect the water to other beneficial use on site. So it doesn't make any difference to the stream flow, but it's still not a bad thing. The other thing is that, you know, it may very well be that we can free up some state or federal dollars to work with somebody at the berry lab to come up with a strain of berries that tastes better and requires less water. Who knows? But all those things are conservation efforts. And I think it's fair that we ask the WIRA 1 team through the phase 3 plan to have a look at that stuff. And, you know, my recommendation there would be that we look for grant funding that would be new money that would allow conservation efforts to happen. The last 2 things that I would ask you to consider from my perspective. One is, I think that the WIRA 1, the management team, would benefit from a full-time executive director. Becky's done a tremendous job, and she's going to continue to do a tremendous job, whether or not she's in, you know, an executive role or support role. I think we just need somebody in charge of the whole thing for accountability and to actually drive it forward and get that visibility out there. And last but not least, I think that the management team really should begin to look at itself as the implementing group for settlements that may come out of adjudication. And, you know, I really think because of the legal issues that are involved with a lot of these engineered solutions, that it's going to have to come out of some kind of legally overseen process that leads to some recommendation to the legislatures to change the laws so that we can do these things in the Nooksack Basin. And it's going to be a long haul. It's going to be, and I think we're going to have much tighter integration between the Wire One management team and whatever the groups are that come out of adjudication that are looking for settlement solutions. So with that, John, do you have anything to add?
No, I thought that was a good summary.
Okay, so I'm going to shut up at this point and let you guys ask questions because I just dumped a ton of data on you.
Okay, go ahead, John, and then I want to make some comments to frame the discussion.
Oh, I didn't have any. I thought he did a nice job of summarizing the
Okay.
issues.
So, so obviously this is, we're all just seeing this today, and depending on our, involvement in the management team before that, might have gotten some exposure before this, but it is the first time I'm reviewing these documents, and I have previously, Chris, I shared with Chris the need to capture water use efficiency in the priorities, and particularly the issue that has to do with relinquishment. And then the other thing that I brought up previously is soil storage of water. So there's above ground storage tank type ideas, but there's a lot of things we can do with how we manage soil that can dramatically improve the amount of water that's retained. There's a pretty tight link between carbon in the soil and its ability to store water, for example. And it occurs to me that maybe soil storage could be incorporated in the potential solutions chart, which refers to beavers. In Whatcom County, the subject of beavers is responded to with derision in the ag community. By the way, so it might be not by environmentalists, by the way. I'm talking about by the ag community. And one of the ways to maybe broaden the discussion to not just talk just about beavers, but would be about taking advantage of natural processes and soil management to store more water, which could include little creatures who are the world's best engineers, in my opinion. Anyway, so those are prior inputs. I want to take a chance to review this, not just by itself, but in conjunction with two other things. And I don't know what the commission thinks about this, but maybe the whole commission wants to review it in the same context. But I'll describe the two other pieces. One other piece besides phase 1 and phase 2 that we've done is the work that Triva Co-led in the report and was in our binder. And it has to do with a study that was published in 2018. And it had to do with identifying.
I didn't understand whose work is it?
Triva Co. led a group of researchers across the county from the tribes primarily. I think there are people from DFW and other places. And they looked at how evolving conditions would impact different species of fish in the tributaries. And there's also some interesting red and blue, red and green color charts, which show stresses to different categories of fish in the basin. And then the third piece of analysis and research that I think is relevant is the work that has recently been completed under the leadership of Chris Elder and that is work related to climate related impacts, and specifically using the Cosmos model, which looks at both water coming up from the ocean and water coming down from the mountains at the same time, and how that impacts flooding, as well as farmland. I mean, it's specifically including farmland, and understanding the effects it has on the ecosystem. So there might be different thoughts here among our technical team about this, but I just feel like it's time for a session on us understanding that what we're facing, what's the problem that we're facing, and perhaps it's something the PUD could sponsor a special meeting to discuss the problem. And as an engineer, I love to talk about solutions. At the same time, I recognize we do have time, and it's even more important that we all understand the problem together. Because if we understand the problem as a community, then it'll be a little bit easier to decide which solutions are the most beneficial to addressing the problem. So I'm not sure when this should happen. Obviously, I think sooner rather than later. But I think there needs to be some kind of conversation. We have a problem with water. Is really what I think of when I think about when I see these charts.
So it doesn't sound like we're in any kind of disagreement. What I would suggest, Atul, is if you forward me the two documents you'd like everybody to take a look at, I'll go ahead and forward them out so that everybody has them. What I'm requesting is that folks look at this stuff over the next 2 weeks, and we want to talk about it and try and get some kind of an agreement on what the PUD's position is at our next commission meeting. And I just want to remind the commissioners that we will be one voice among very, very many. And so we may have a wish list of stuff that goes in and you see none of it or very little of it coming back. And that's because we are one voice. And I just want to make sure that we speak with a single voice, and then I get your wishes down on paper, and then I get it right.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. And not only that we speak with one voice, but the voice conveys something that's pretty concise. Because if we're concise as an organization, I think it'll be easy to get support from the councils, cities and county, because they all recognize us as the experts. But if I can add to that, a simple message will be really potent, I think.
So the questions are the bottom 6 ones where it says question for planning the next multi-year work plan. Those are the questions that we need to answer, and they're open-ended enough that we can go ahead and have some fairly long form answers in there. The survey itself is going to be available for, one entry per organization. It's on SurveyMonkey. So if I can get consensus next time, I'll go ahead and enter it, and we'll be off to the races.
I just want to clarify the memo you were referring, one of the 2 memos you were referring to, Commissioner, was the one entitled Assessing the Ecological Effects of Wyver One Watershed Plan Update. It was a technical memo prepared in support of the watershed plan update by the two tribes, technical staff, in 2018, and that was in your binder.
I feel like we need to address the graph like in more detail. And I actually had the opportunity to see this sooner. But we've all had conversations recently on water use efficiency and conservation. And I agree with Chris that it's a yes and approach, right? Like, yes, of course we should conserve. And looking at this graph, like even with no human consumption, even with no withdrawals from the Nooksack, we're looking at 3 to 4 months of a dry river. So you know, you can take all of the water use efficiency that you want and you're, you know, in 50 years, you're going to end up with a dry river. So like, that's a call to action if I've ever seen one that's looking outside of the box, right? That is addressing, you know, this foster decision, which I'd never even heard about. Like we're, you know, we're going to have to tackle this in a much different way, because also on the other side of that dry river is just an overwhelming deluge of water in the winter. So I don't know. I just think that we need to be looking at solutions that are not included in here, and you know, and I don't know where we go from there, but yeah, conservation, of course. And you know, what the heck are we going to do to keep the river from going dry? Because that's what I'm looking at. And that's, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen nobody has shown me anything that said, hey, your river is going to be dry in 50 years. So,
Yeah, in 50 years on this kind of problem sounds like a long time. It's tomorrow.
I know we need to start now.
Yeah.
You know, and whatever, you know, we're doing in phase 3 needs to address that. Like it needs to be emergent. Yeah.
I think that's really well said. And, you know, yeah, this is the thing that we need to focus on. I think, you know, looking forward to having a longer conversation about this, but to me, I also think funding needs to be a huge part of this. When I look at the 9 things, it's like, it's money. We got, whatever we're going to do is going to be incredibly expensive.
Well,
And
you know,
we need
it's
to
got
figure
to
out
start
how to
with
pay
updating
for
the
it.
models.
Yeah.
And that ain't gonna be cheap. But on the other hand, we do have a budget proviso and, you know, some money coming through the county that could be pointed right at Wire One management and get some of this stuff started. So, you know, and I think that helps jumpstart the whole process. When you look at the adjudication, ultimately, you're going to have the water rights resolved. You're going to have junior rights that aren't, I'll say funded, they don't have any water, and you're going to have senior rights that have water. Okay, that doesn't change that graph. Not at all, not one iota. And, you know, at some point, people are going to say, well, hold on, we need, you know, the adjudication itself. As part of solving which rights are satisfied, we also may need to say, you know, which rights are actually preserved and exist 50 years from now.
Right.
And I think that's what, you know, you're going to have a group of people coming out of adjudication, I hope, that speak with one voice, that are societally based, including the tribes and everybody that has an interest in Whatcom County. And that group is the one that goes to the legislature and the governor and says, here's laws need to be changed. And here's how we propose to fix that. If you don't want it for the whole state, that's fine. We need to do something in this basin. And then I think the Wire One group's going to be the one that really begins to execute this stuff. And it's going to be very expensive. And it's going to be painful. And there are going to be people, somebody's ox is going to be gored in this whole thing. Anytime, think about permitting anything, and somebody's going to be against it. And, you know, we're going to have to do a lot of things to fix that.
And we're going to have to start now.
Yes.
Can I say 2 things?
Go
First,
ahead, John.
I just want to remind everyone that in an adjudication, strictly speaking, all that occurs is a determination of the validity of the water rights and a prioritization, essentially a list. It does not get to orders of shutting anybody off. It does not resolve in the senior right order saying you can shut off a lower order, nor does it address what remedies might be available and what we call solutions to all the various demands on the river. You will have questions about what the effect of dry rivers are on fish, what is necessary for fish, what is sustainable harvest, what is the scope of a tribal right, what is the scope of fish needs, massively technical issues. The models will be massively litigated in this case. But all of that is around what a right is and where it sits on the priority list. The design of solutions is a total separate discussion, but can be part of solutions of an adjudication, because when you have a settlement agreement, you can pack in other issues and resolve the underlying legal claims of right. So these solutions are separate, but not necessarily. And the settlement discussions, which I would urge to be somewhat confidential, have an opportunity to accelerate some of those processes. And given that the tribes have involved the federal negotiating teams, the federal litigation teams on their team, the thought is that that might help facilitate some federal dollars later. It's not something the tribes or the federal team have said, but you have contacts now on the tribal side into the federal government that might help free up some federal dollars if you get to some partial or comprehensive solutions. Beyond that, I have some thoughts that I was going to bring up in 2 weeks. If you want to have a 5-minute executive session at the end, you can add that to the agenda and I can share some early preliminary thoughts.
What is
I
the
think I
commission?
would appreciate that.
Yeah, do we need
Yeah.
to change the agenda?
You would need the motion to add that to the agenda
Today.
today.
Yeah,
I'd like
Well, do you
to,
guys want to do that today or do you want to wait 2 weeks?
Sure, let's do
well,
it.
he said it's 5 minutes, so I mean, I would move that we add a 5-minute executive session to the agenda today.
Take a chance.
Make
And
it 10, yeah.
I will move.
second that.
Yeah, you read my mind, John. Make it 10, yeah.
I'll second.
Motion is second to add an executive session at the end of the agenda for
On
today's
potential
meeting
litigation.
on potential litigation related to the Nooksack adjudication. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, well, before we wrap this up, I just wanted to make one other observation. Commissioner Grant, you made the point about the amount of resources, and I think that was echoed in the room. Certainly agree. Trying to be the forever optimist. One of the things that I think is a unique resource is to our entire community is the tribes and their relationship to the federal government as a federally recognized tribe. And because of that, and because the state of Washington exists, because of the treaties, we have our community has a unique ability to ask the federal government to support actions that support the treaty rights and thereby benefit the entire community, not just the tribes. So when I first got involved in this subject, Chris, 4 or 5 years ago, to me, when we talked about what was coming down the pike and the crises of water that we're going to be faced with in this community, my first thought was, how do we accelerate the process to get the federal government involved with funding? And that still remains my biggest question. And it's certainly the work we're doing is helping to craft that request. But someday soon, I hope we can go to our federal delegation and say, not Houston, Washington, other Washington, we have a problem. So any more comments on adjudication?
I look forward to seeing your comments in 2 weeks on this and have a nice discussion about it.
Great.
Great. So let's move on in the agenda. I believe the next item is the per diem policy.
And if I may, I'll just kick off with a couple of comments. There was a commission policy that was passed, and it was passed by this commission on January 28th, 2020, and got the resolution and the policy itself behind. The question was raised about per diem and maybe a quick review of the per diem policy, and that is section 7 of the policy on governance. Now, the policy on governance itself is worth rereading periodically. I do have it in my January 1st tickler so that I read it beginning of every year, because it's just a reminder of what we're responsible for and who's on first. And and everything else that we do around here. So it's not a bad thing to reread. So the question came up, could we have a review of the per diem section? And of course, we've done that. We scheduled it. And at this point, I'd just kick it over to John to do a quick overview.
Sure, I'm just going to start with a quick background. The commission's compensation and expenses. So the commissioners of public utility districts receive a salary. And that's based largely on how much revenue the district has. And I won't go through variations, but it's set by subsection 1 of RCW 5412.080. You're also allowed to receive your reasonable expenses actually incurred in connection with businesses and meetings, which can include subsistence, lodging, and travel from your place of residence. So, and then in addition to that, the commissioners are allowed a per diem that's set by statute for the portion spent in actual attendance of official meetings at the district commission like this. And this is where the language becomes subject to interpretation, or in the performance of other official services or duties on behalf of the district. So the question becomes, what is an official service or duty performed on behalf of the commission? So over the years, the discussion was who makes the determination of what's duties or services performed on behalf of the district. Some commissioners, none of the present ones, have wanted that to be the general manager. And the general manager and myself advocated against that because you did not want to put your employee essentially in a position of determining whether a commissioner, the boss, was entitled to a per diem. And so that was one issue. One could interpret official services or duties very narrowly as to what's an official service or duty. You know, I'm interested in something that might be of interest to the commission. I'm going to go attend, may not be an official service and may not be on behalf of the district, because it begs the other question. One commissioner doesn't have the authority to determine what's on behalf of the district. That's the commission decision, arguably, or unless it's delegated to somebody. So what's official or services or duties, then it's really a commission determination. And whether it's performed, whether it's something that's on behalf of the district is the commission determination, again, unless delegated either to a general manager, or the commission decides that every individual commissioner can decide on their own, which I would recommend a process which you did adopt, which was that the commission decide what's an official duty or service and what's on behalf of the district. So to do that, we drafted a policy that was intended to be prospective rather than have a commissioner coming in to their other fellow commissioners saying, hey, I attended something last Thursday I thought was of value. I'd like you to have you approve my attendance last week. That felt like that might put commissioners at odds, which we wanted to discourage, just creating a culture amongst commission. So what happens if a commissioner disagreed with another commissioner's, whether something last week was a benefit to the district, now you put the commissioners at odds. We didn't want to foster that. So in that discussion that we had, the commission decided to be prospective. And to do that, we said, well, let's proactively decide what meetings we determine in advance are of official services or duties performed on behalf of the district. And now resolution 797 passed in 2021 is the current version. In fact, that's an update from what was in your policy of governance and management. There's a couple extra, like the egg board. I think the surface water work sections were added. We also said one meeting a week with the general manager, because get you educated or have communications. And then we've provided a process that, there may be things that might come up. So we said you would do those in advance. So not a retroactive. I attended this last week and I'm going to submit a per diem request for something that happened last week that isn't on the pre-approved list. The commissioners during their commissioner updates were to identify something that prospectively they see coming up that they intended to attend. And so rather than forcing the commission to have a vote on it, the policy says that and this is 716, that if approved in advance by the commission, when a commissioner advises the commission of his or her planned attendance, the purpose of the meeting, allowing other commissioners to object on behalf of the district or further of the commissioner's duties. So the concept in the process 7.2 is how you submit those. The concept was that a commissioner would disclose what they're doing, explain the reasons, and if no one objected, we would treat that as a implied consent. And then Ann would take the notes. That was the meeting on Thursday next week that's involving broadband meeting for this. That's not on the list. I'm just making something. That would have been deemed approved because it was disclosed and no one objected. If you had a question about whether something was worth the district of service or further to the district, the commissioner would raise the question and say, I don't think that would really be appropriate next week. And then you'd have that discussion in advance. That seemed to be less of an issue when they were having something that was already attended and someone was seeking after the fact approval. So that's the process. And takes track of those that you would have approved. And then when the per diem forms come in, if it's on the list, they can be approved. If it's not on the list, then staff isn't authorized to approve that per diem by the policy. They should approve. And so it's it is appropriate annually to look at this and see if there's or anytime, if there's types of meetings you want to add, or if you want to change the process. But again, staff is not authorized to approve a per diem that has not been pre-approved, either on the list or at a commission meeting. So if a commissioner had a per diem come through that was unapproved by staff, that because staff said it wasn't brought up at a meeting and it's not on the pre-approved list. That's how it works.
And I think it's a little broader than just per diems. It's other expenses.
Other expenses too. So travel, you have this, the same process would be for the reasonable reimbursement for reasonable expenses actually incurred in connection with the meeting. So travel, meals, reasonable expenses. I would expect to me that going to the Met Grill in downtown Seattle and, taking 3 or 4 staff of another company out may not be a reasonable expense. I'm making something else.
Okay, I'll cancel that plan, Jim. I'll cancel that.
Thanks, John. I think that under 716, it might be helpful if under our commissioner reports, we're a little bit more explicit about when we're asking for per diem for another meeting. Because I've gone back and read this when I was trying to fill out my per diem policy or my per diem report, and in my reading of it, it felt like if you didn't specifically ask, I would, or say, I'm planning to charge a per diem for X meeting, then it's not something that you should put on your per diem report. So I don't know what the other commissioners think, but to me, just saying, oh yeah, I'll call Councilmember Galloway to check in about the ILA. That's a 15-minute phone call. I'm not going to charge a per diem for that. In my opinion, I don't think that's an appropriate use of this. But, I'm going to spend 3 hours on the PPC fuel meeting. Guys, are you okay with me doing it? That I think to me, it would be better if we were explicit about it, and it might help Ann too. If we just do a summary.
A lot simpler for staff.
Because to me, it's been confusing for, what are we just letting each other know about versus what do we think really rises to the level of needing a full per diem for?
I think that's a good practice because more clarity is more precision is better. I would also note that you're not allowed per diem for services from a ministerial or professional nature. So the check and call might or might not be that. I would say printing off my copies for the Tuesday meeting on Monday night printing of my copies of the agenda for Tuesday morning, that's a ministerial act and that's not an official duty. But just for clarity, there's going to be gray in here. So more clarity that the commission can provide to staff on what they intend to submit for per diem would be helpful.
And I'll just, I've worked now for a number of commissions. This is my 4th commission. And if you count the Seattle City Council, what I've seen over time is that people tend to look at what they do and decide, is this de minimis or not? And usually a short phone call, a drive-by meeting, anything like that, you just never see it. It's just assumed. And I think part of that is the role of staff and perhaps the role of the commission is to oversee the costs of the organization and try and keep those under control and at a reasonable level. And You know, so I would just observe that in all the places that I've worked, there have been many times where I've seen commissioners do, you know, minor things and you just never see it on a per diem. That's the way it is.
And I would add for the PUD commission, like, and it's one of the very few special purpose districts that have the degree of compensation PUD has, commissioners have. You have a salary. So there's a kind of a, I think it's not expressly stated as this in the statute, but you already are compensated per month, essentially. And so what does the per diem rise to? There's a judgment call. And we're trying to put that judgment in the place of the commission. And not on staff or let an individual commissioner. Because again, individual commissioners actually could run afoul of other commissioners. You create a cultural problem. So I echo Chris's comments.
This is all very informative. So I've only, you know, WAPUDA meetings because, you know, we're there representing, Whatcom PUD, and then our regular scheduled meetings when we're together. Those are the only things that I have been noting on my per diem schedule. Cause I sort of feel like, meetings that I have with constituents or, you know, even other elected officials are just part of me serving my district, right? They're just part of my service for the Whatcom PUD. So I would have never imagined like putting down a meeting with Eric Hurst or a meeting with Birch Bay Water, but I guess that might be my misunderstanding of what's in here. So thank you for bringing this up because I, you know.
Well, so if your meeting with Eric Hurst isn't on the list of pre-approved meetings.
Yeah.
So if you were anticipating that, you would say, I have a scheduled meeting next Wednesday with Eric Hurst. I expect it to be this topic, which is relevant for me for this. So I would like to, I'm intending on submitting that for per diem. You don't hear an objection, then it's noted. If you don't raise it, then the presumption is it's not a per diem that proceeds that way. The one other thing I'd add, there is a cap on your per diem on an annual basis. So it's not an unfettered expense that someone can say, I'm going to run a per diem every day, 365. And so I've just bumped my salary $90 a day, 3 times 365. There is a cap on the per diem in the statute. And I think the commission budgets for that. But that doesn't mean use it. That's your decisions.
Yeah, the Eric Hurst meeting though, like I wouldn't have sought per diem for that, but I'm wondering like if another, so what you're saying though is if during a meeting, say Christine was like, hey, I want to meet with, you know, Eric Hurst, and I'm going to charge that for per diem. It's our responsibility as a commission to say, oh yeah, we think that that's fine, or
Yes.
no, okay, that's so awkward. But
Well,
Yeah.
the question, if we couldn't come up with really bright line rules other than identifying it, you could say no, other than this list of 7 or 11 items. And the meeting with the GM, nothing else is allowed for per diem. You could say that you would take away that discretion. But there was a push to have a general manager make that decision, and that didn't feel right to that general manager. And I would echo that.
And to this one.
And to this one. And I echoed that concern. So then what is determined to be on behalf of the district? It's a commission determination, unless you want to say each individual commissioner decides, and that's within your prerogative to delegate it to individual commissioners. Today you just said it's the commission.
Well, and I think that your point about it being awkward is that maybe in that situation, it would be awkward because it's an awkward thing to ask a per diem for. A thing where, for example, I've been spending a lot of time trying to form this clean energy caucus with other PUD commissioners. I've put in a lot of time already. I've never billed a per diem for it. I'm working with a member of the executive board of Energy Northwest. We're having another meeting in May, and I might come to all of you at the next meeting and say, hey, you guys, we've got like 6 commissioners from SNOPUD and Clallam, you know, is this something that you two are comfortable with me charging a per diem for once a month because I'm trying to form this clean energy caucus? And I would feel good about doing that because it's, you know, a substantial amount of my time. I think all of this really does come back to, you know, responsible use of money and making sure that we are able to show our ratepayers that we are doing work that benefits them and our community. And, you know, Dan Fagerly from Ferry County, a commissioner there, when I was at the last WAPUDA meeting down in February, he said he calculates out per customer what it costs for him to go to those WAPUDA meetings, because he's got to travel across the state. He's there for 3 days, you know, it ends up being about $1,000 for him to go, and they don't have very many customers in Berry County, and he figures out the exact amount, because it's really important to him to make sure his ratepayers, he's doing right by his ratepayers. So I think that's just what it's all about, and being transparent with each other. So I know I was the one to ask for the update on the per diem policy, so thank you for taking the time.
I have two things that might be helpful as clarifications. One thing is that Commissioner Arnett mentioned something I want to clarify. I've never put our regular meetings on my per diem sheet, and actually that's our practice, right? We don't, the staff covers the regular meetings. Does staff cover also make sure to enter special meetings? Because I think I don't put special meetings on my per diem sheet either. That's correct?
Yeah, Ann's nodding yes.
Yeah, okay. So we don't put special and regular meetings on the per diem sheets. Okay, that's one clarification. The other clarification is regarding WAPUDA. There are committees that we are assigned to. And then there's other meetings like Commissioner Education and the Board of Directors, which apply to all of us because they cover all of the materials that were covered in the previous 2 days. How does the commission want to handle those situations?
I'll just say already the policy says attendance, this is covered for per diem, is attendance at WAPUDA annual conference and seminars and committee meetings thereof. Also, attendance at meetings for which a commission has been appointed by the board as the representative or alternative representative for and by the district. So if you're on the if you're assigned as the alternate to the Water Resources Committee for WAPUDA and you attend, that's already predetermined to be for the official duty for the benefit of the district.
And that would be whether you attend physically or virtually.
Yes.
So what I'm asking about is something that's a little different because we're not all on the board of directors. Only one of us is, and then the alternate is staff. So if any one of us want to attend the board of directors meeting, should that be something that we put in our per diem sheet or not?
That is something you should ask the commission to approve because it's not on the pre-approved list. So again, if it's not on the pre-approved list, if you put it on the per diem sheet, it'll be denied. Unless you brought it up to the commission in your commission report says, I'm attending, there's a board meeting next week and I'm not on the board, but I'm going to attend. And put that on my per diem. And if the commission, no one objects, then proceed and put it on your per diem sheet. If you don't ask that or disclose that, and you're not the assigned person and it's not on the pre-approved list, then it would be denied by the current policy.
Okay, so this week, the topic on the Commissioner Education Roundtable is strategic planning. And I have not attended or reported attending any of the Commissioner Education sessions, and I'd like to attend this one because I'm interested in the subject of strategic planning.
Okay, then I think that's would be an appropriate type of thing to bring up to the commission. The thought was that would be during the commissioner reports. And that if the commissioners had a question about that or disagreed, they could raise that.
I'll step in my commissioner report. Okay, great. Thanks. I just want to clarify those two items.
Well, actually, I think that's covered under 7.1.2, where it specifically talks about WAPUDA conferences and seminars.
I think
So
anything
I think that's
WAPUDA related is a pre-approved.
That's a WAPUDA seminar, then that's pre-approved.
Yeah.
And that's exactly.
Yeah.
That was my understanding.
That's how I read it too, Atul. I think that anything that's a WAPUDA training
Yes.
or committee is pre-approved.
Okay.
Because it's.
And I think, just my opinion on this thing, it's in our customers' best interests for you guys to be as well educated as possible. And that's a big part of what WAPUDA does. So, I don't think there's an issue there at all.
It's probably the due we pay. Sorry to interrupt you, John. It's probably the due that we pay at the PUD that we get the most value for.
So I'm sorry, your example, I misunderstood that was a WPUDA process, then that would be covered by the pre-approved. If it was, say, a Energy Northwest strategic planning session, that would not be covered.
Yeah, we just hadn't gotten to that level.
Yeah, you haven't approved that kind of seminar from Energy Northwest as a pre-approval.
Because the tool's not on the Energy Northwest, because I'm the representative.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Or if they had some special non-board meeting, strategic planning training session for members that Energy Northwest was putting on,
Okay.
and people wanted to attend that, then that would be the type of thing to bring up at your commissioner report to say, hey, Energy Northwest is doing a special training in Kennewick on, July 22nd. I'd like to attend.
On small modular reactors, or,
Yeah,
which
or
they
whatever.
do.
Yeah, so that's how you would handle it.
Thank you. All right, so
So unless there's any updates, this policy 797 needs to be read as is supplemented the policy from 2020. So I think next year we'll probably restate the policy and give any updates. So if you have any revisions or changes either to the per diem policy or the policy and governance and management, let Chris and or I know, or Ann, and we can work that in.
I just hate being the overseer for the other commissioners, to be honest.
So that was
It's better than just having.
That's the problem.
It is, I like strong policy, and that, like, I see it as being guardrails, right?
Yes.
And then, having a policy that's open to interpretation makes me feel uncomfortable. And I think
Yeah.
there is a responsibility to the ratepayers, right? So, I mean, I might just be like, yeah, whatever, go have margaritas with your friends. Sounds good. Do you know, like, I just don't. I would like to see something really clear. Like, I think that your time working with other, like, PUDs on something energy related, like, I feel like we could encompass that into this policy so that I don't have to make a decision about whether or not it's covered. I don't know. I'll just say
I
that.
think that just having a clear section under each commissioner report where you explain what you're doing, I mean, I think it will be very rare that any of us would
Yeah.
say.
yeah,
I don't
and
agree with
by
it.
example, like when I brought up yesterday's Jefferson PUD event in our last meeting, I gathered that the two of you weren't like super excited about the idea of me covering that. So I left it alone. I said, well, if I want to go, I'll go. But I'm not going to put it on my per diem. And I didn't take any offense to that. And when I was like, oh, you guys, why won't you let me go to Jefferson PUD? I was like, oh, you're not super excited about seeing that as something that falls under the per diem. So it's fine. I let it go. And I had conversations with commissioners instead, which is fine. I'm just saying is that I get used to it.
Is it worth having a subsection under commissioner reports as per diem requests, just as a reminder?
Sure. Yeah. Do you think so?
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
We can add it to the agenda, no problem.
Sure.
Just put it in there as a placeholder, just so that you guys have got it, kind of a reminder.
Mhm.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Should we move on to the general manager's report?
Fortunately, my report is very, very simple this time. I just want to remind the three of you and John, of course, and anybody else who's listening, that on Thursday, we're going to have our meeting to cover the feasibility study. It's at the bottom of the agenda here. It's the Pioneer Park Pavilion on Cherry Street in Ferndale from 4 to 6. And I'm just looking forward to it.
And I might be, I expect to be fine by then, but if not, I will hopefully just be able to attend wearing a mask or something. But I'm feeling better already. So
that just a reminder from Ann, that's a in-person meeting only. There won't be any hybrid option.
yeah,
So-
that's why I'm gonna absolutely try to be there. So
And I had asked you before, but maybe we all want to know that what sort of the commissioner's role is at that meeting, are we, I'd asked, are we going to be sitting at a table and answering questions? And it sounded like we would just be, part of the crowd essentially.
My hope is that you're part of the audience but people know who you are. So my intent is to say a few words, kicking the thing off, recognizing the three of you and any other electeds who show up, so that's kind of the intro part of the thing. And then I'll make some comments about, the study itself, the genesis, why we chose ESS /GDS. And then I'm going to kick it over to Gary Saliba, who's going to kind of walk through the feasibility study. I would expect most of the questions to be directed to Gary, because they should be kind of technical in nature. How to make this forecast? What's your sensitivity around it? That kind of thing. And to the extent that it's more of a, kind of a policy, or what are you going to do with it? I'll take a shot at it. I would recommend that you guys just listen. And I'm not going to make any answers. If somebody says, point blank, are you going to do X, Y, Z as a result of this? The purpose of today's meeting is to get input and find out what people are concerned about, and to have people look at the study and give us their feedback on the study itself. Of course, feel free if you feel inclined to answer a question, that's great as well.
Depending on the turnout, at our broadband open house that we had back in May or June, I think there were only like 15 people that came. And I thought it was,
and only 3 were actually of the public. The rest of them were, like us.
yeah. I think it's really good. Instead of just introducing us, we did that. We went around and everybody
that was
said
really
who they
good.
were and why they were interested in being there. So assuming we don't have hundreds of people come, which I sort of doubt there will be, I think that doing an introduction where everyone feels included and gets kind of a chance to say who they are and why they're there was really nice.
Yeah, that's really good. And the other thing that happened in that one, because it was so small, was we handled the whole thing completely informally. And we were able to walk the 3 people who came each individually through the whole plan. And then so yeah, I'm flexible. If we end up with a crowd, we'll have to have more structure. If we end up with a few people show up, then it can be a lot less formal. And I think you're right. So we'll keep an eye on that. I also expect that there'll be possibility that some people will wander in late. It happens. So if we do it informally, then I'll make sure that we have kind of grab the newcomers and introduce them around, try and get them up to speed and work that. Otherwise, if it's a lot of people and people come in at 5:30, they're just going to get the piece of it they get.
So Christine, I heard Dennis Kucinich is coming.
I know, I was gonna say, that's how we can get hundreds of people to show up.
That'll work, yeah.
That's
update.
my belated April Fool's joke. So
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
I'll give him a call.
So I guess we can go to the operations report unless anybody's got questions for me. I don't know if Brian just came back from Palm Springs and yeah, and see that smile? It's just not right. It's just not.
Happy to be here, yes.
How do we know you're still not in Palm Springs, Brian?
You don't, Commissioner. No, I will attest that there's a fine wind resource in the greater Palm Springs area. When I was there, we had a couple of strong wind events and happened to drive over and got to view. It's, for those of you who haven't been there, it's marvelous if you're into wind energy technology, because you'll see rows and rows of wind turbines, the different generations and the different sizes, and it's pretty impressive. I came away with they're marvelous machines. The point we've gotten to, because the day I drove by, it was a windstorm. We were in basically a sandstorm. Visibility was poor. You could feel the sand on the vehicle, but those turbines were running. So it's got to be hard on them, but they've kind of perfected that technology and the gearing and everything. So anyway, enough of that. I don't have much. I would just kind of give you a heads up next time at the next commission meeting. I would like to give you a status report on where we're at with the new Bonneville power contracts that will kick off in 2028, but we'll be signing a contract late 24 or 25. And the other thing is, I think you're aware that Kurt and Garrett did, in my absence, they did issue an RFP for a solar project to be located here at the Plant 2 facility. The deadline for bids and the bid opening will be this Friday. To date, we have gotten 3 responses.
Oh, great.
That RFP, so we will have a good variety of proposals, and hopefully we'll get a good one. So we'll be able to give you the results at the next commission meeting. The only other thing I'll just mention, and it's kind of a broken record, but Chris and I are continuing to monitor the power markets, and power prices, forward prices are still high. And probably what's significant about that is it's really, if you combine the high forward prices with transmission constraints, still an impediment on new projects that are large electric loads. Whether you're talking about a clean energy project or clean fuel project, electrolyzers or whatever, it's really retarding that market and that desire on the developer's part to move forward. And what you're seeing is that these projects are locating elsewhere strategically, where either power is lower price or they can get hydropower. If you look at what's going on in Grant County, they've got server farms. Now they're going to be developing a hydrogen complex there with electrolyzers. It's all because power price, land's cheap, got direct access to the grid, or they don't have to go to the grid because they're connected to Grant County PUD. So it's really, impacting right now where these new developments are taking place, and this has a negative impact on Western Washington. So I'll leave it at that. And that's all I have.
I had one thing, unrelated to the operations report, but for timing, Commissioner Deshmani, since you're not present for the executive session, and it's given a short time, is a phone call sufficient for you, or should we set
Sure.
up a Zoom?
That's fine. I don't have any problem calling in, and maybe if the
Or we can call you on a cell phone or something. I can put my cell phone here and call you on your cell number.
that'd be fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. That a little less complexity at the 11th hour. So thank you for your indulgence.
Yeah, no problem. And then just in case anything happens, Commissioner Grant can take over the meeting and close the meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. Sorry. It was an operational issue.
That gets us to commission reports.
If I could go first, my comments are mostly gonna dovetail on what Brian was saying. The main thing that I did was I attended the Public Power Council's Forum of Elected Utility Leaders, the Fuel Group. Yeah, I know someone smart came up with that acronym. And we haven't been that engaged with PPC because we don't, at the beginning of the year, we haven't been delegating a representative to it, but I was really impressed with the information presented at this meeting and learned a lot. And so I'll just share some of the high level things. There's this BPA is expected to have their draft decision in July about what this kind of post 2028 world looks like for our contracts. And they're saying, yes, it's going to be a draft, but really not much is going to change after July. So if we want things to change, we need to talk to them now. And they're kind of doing this like roadshow over the next few weeks here where they're getting input from a lot of their different customers. So if we want to change anything, it really should happen before July. And that draft is that what you were talking about then, Brian? You've
Yeah.
seen it?
Yeah,
No,
Steve and Brian were tracking that
Okay.
before I got here.
Okay.
Brian and I have been tracking it since I got here.
Okay,
Yeah,
Okay.
the draft from Bonneville is not, out. There is a proposal out there from Bono, their original one, but the final draft is not out yet.
okay, but the draft of the draft is out there and they're doing these listening sessions. So I don't know, how engaged we want to be in that, but there's a lot of moving pieces right now. And I think Michael Dean, who's the policy director for PPC, was doing a lot of the speaking and really learned a lot from him. Kind of generally speaking, he's just, saying we are anticipating a lot of load growth in the region. And like, if I could summarize the whole 2-hour-ish meeting in one word, it's like, we need new generation resources. That's the name of the game, right? Variable resources are going to be part of the solution. And, a lot of us on the call have these carbon-free requirements. Not everybody is from Washington and Oregon that was on the call, but the need for a carbon-free product was definitely a highlight too. But we need firm power and we can't get that from the variable resources. And so what Michael Dean said, again, he's the policy director for PPC, is he doesn't see how we can meet our carbon goals without small modular nuclear reactors. So, I know different people are going to have different thoughts on that, but that was what he shared. And to me, it really underscores the need to continue really learning about that technology. Jim Malinowski from Clark asked a question about how much BPA should depend on market purchases versus acquiring firm resources. And the answer from PPC was basically that we're not going to be able to just rely on the wholesale market anymore. We're going to need to start developing new resources. And I know in my role on Energy Northwest, that's becoming a bigger conversation. The executive board just sent BPA a letter about developing an SMR because we need more resources. He sort of ended the conversation. So Michael Dean's wife actually works for PGE, which is the investor-owned utility in Portland. And he sort of comforted us all at the end of the meeting by saying, we're in a much better position than the investor-owned utilities. Sorry, Jack Wellman from PSE. But basically, IOUs are in a huge hole in the states where they have these carbon-free mandates. And at least we have all of our carbon-free hydro, and we have the Columbia River Generating Station, which is the nuclear power plant out in the Tri-Cities. So this puts us at a huge advantage, but all of us are going to be struggling, and there's just a ton of work to do, is basically the message. And I think we do need to keep putting pressure on BPA to not just be this marketer of power, but to really understand that they need to help the whole region move faster on building these generation resources. So that's it for me. It was an eye-opening discussion. And I also wonder, have we talked to PPC about our electric expansion report or shared it with them?
We have not shared it with PPC.
Okay.
Shared it with WPUDA.
Okay. I think it would be worth letting Michael Dean know about it.
I can reach out to him and talk to him and send him a copy.
I think it would be, I'd be very interested to kind of hear his thoughts on it. Yeah. Especially as because we are members of PPC. We pay PPC to sort of help us negotiate with BPA. Am I describing that accurately?
That's exactly correct.
So
and NRU and PNUCC.
Right.
So those are the three organizations that are negotiating with BPA.
Yeah.
And all three of them are doing it on our behalf.
Yeah.
So I mean, one thing is I'm absolutely delighted that you're getting interested in this and you're learning more about it. I hope you don't become frustrated if you want something to happen and Bonneville just says, no, you're Whatcom. You know,
Yeah.
because it's really the question of the tail wagging the dog. Their largest customer is Snohomish, buys 11% of EPA's output.
I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah,
Okay.
that's their largest customer. Second largest customer, I think, is Seattle, third is Tacoma.
Okay.
So they,
Because the Eastern Washington PUDs generate their own Grant, Chelan,
yes,
Douglas, they all have their own hydro plants.
yeah, and so just two things that I'd like to comment on.
Yeah,
So just to think about, I totally agree with the idea that we need more generation, tons more. There's got to be ways to firm it. People are not talking about the where, because the load is here on the west side of the state.
mhm,
And a lot of the resources that people are targeting are on the east side of the state. And if you build the intermittent resources, especially, or the storage or anything else on the east side of the state, you've got to couple that with transmission construction to get the power over here. And that is hugely problematic compared to building a resource over here. Now, building the resource over here is hugely problematic also. But think about a small modular reactor at Cherry Point. What could possibly go wrong? You know, I mean, think about the permitting issues alone. The second thing is that the point that Mr. Dean was making is exactly correct. Just yesterday, Puget Sound Energy, well, I don't know if they announced yesterday, but the article ran yesterday. Their latest IRP says that they're going to be 1,700 megawatts short, average megawatts short by 2030 to comply with CETA. 1,700 average megawatts short. That's the entire load of the city of Seattle or Snohomish.
yeah, wow.
They're going to be that short. And that's if everything that's in their plan goes through. So yeah, these IOUs are in a much different position than public power. And as much as I kind of want to rub my hands in glee, I also feel really sorry for them, because that's a steep hill they're going to be climbing up the next 7-8 years. So that'll show.
And I think we're also, yeah, it's well, to be continued, but that was the main learning I've done since my last meeting, or the last commission meeting. So on to whoever wants to go next.
I'll go. It'll be quick. We did have, Chris and I did have a meeting with Eric Hurst to talk about water use efficiency and conservation. And I think that was, it was a great meeting for everyone involved, I think. And I certainly learned a lot. It's where I got my copy of the phase 2 for WIRA 1, and it was very enlightening and shocking. So you know, I've had to sit with that over the weekend and think about some things, think about my life. I'll be attending the WAPUDA conferences this week. And then I wanted to ask you, as promised, sent us a list of our memberships after, you know,
I've also been informed that we joined the Ferndale Chamber of Commerce, and it's $325 a year.
Great.
It's not on the list.
Okay.
It's something we just did recently.
Okay, thank you for the list. That's really helpful. I was wondering if there is also a donations list, because I know that we give to NC. Are there other organizations that we're giving to? They're the only ones.
What about Farming for Life?
That is, I'm not sure what the status of that is. The exhibit at the Northwest Washington Fair.
Oh, I see.
So let me go back and ask Annette and Tracy just to look, are there any other, one-time donations or things like that where we support other organizations? I was specifically asking to look for dues.
Yeah. No, and that's great.
what
Yeah,
triggered
I was
that
just,
list.
I was just curious, where else we're, where we're giving, and what kind of projects. So, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. So the main thing I'd like to share with the group on is I attended the EDI board meeting. I wanted to share that it was, I think the second one that I've attended. Last year, I think there's only one, or maybe there was a second, but this is a good one. A lot of good content discussed, and I'm going to switch to another screen, so my video may go off while I'm doing that. So the there was a summary of the current status of the EDI fund, which is again intended to fund infrastructure and utilities for the community. And the balance at the end of 2024 now is for the public utilities improvement and EDI fund is going to be 25 million estimated. So there's a lot of money there, and just something for us all to know that that balance is actually growing. So that's something just for us all to be aware of. There was a application that was approved by a drainage improvement district and related to a culvert replacement. And that project basically has the additional benefit of helping with, of course, culverts are helpful for fish passage, but the other benefit of culverts is that they, in this particular case, is going to help with drainage and reduce flooding. So that received a unanimous support of 9-0. There was a considerable amount of discussion at this EDI meeting on housing. And there was no conclusion, but there will be at the next EDI meeting, which I assume as because it's pending discussion, will be happening pretty soon. And there'll be extensive discussion from Paul Schisler and folks from the city. And the topics that are being discussed are number one, the development of King Mountain, which is within the region of the city, and the topic was how to incorporate some affordable housing in that development. The other affordable housing conversation was regarding Paul Schisler, and he wants there to be a carve out at EDI for affordable housing, recognizing the fact, I suppose, that there's money at EDI, and there was lots of question and answer, and it's a hot topic at EDI about whether housing can be part of the scope of EDI, whether housing is appropriate within the scope of EDI. So that's a summary of the EDI meeting. Other than that, of course, I'll be attending the PUD meetings this week, and I think maybe Commissioner Grant, you and I can coordinate on PPC attendance. So for some reason, I didn't get the notices for the fuel meeting until it was, and I thought I might be able to attend, but I wasn't able to attend. But I will be, again, trying to cover the PPC meetings. But maybe Chris, you can help us coordinate as time goes forward to figure out if one or both, who's going to be attending that.
Yeah, I get the monthly notifications for all their meetings, the minutes, all that stuff. That's typically what I review.
Yeah, we can just play it by ear. I can be the alternate if there's ones you can't go to. What I learned about the fuel meetings through that kind of informal clean energy caucus group, and they said these are really good meetings to kind of get the 3,000 foot view of what's going on. So yeah, just keep me posted. You're going to the one in Portland, right? In a few weeks.
Yeah, there'll be one in May.
Okay.
And those are available virtually. You don't have to drive down there. You can attend just by calling in.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'll attend it virtually or in person, and at some point it probably makes sense to meet people face to face. Yeah, but not every time for sure. All right, so that's the end of my commissioner report.
You want to review per diems now, a separate item, or just?
Well, yeah, I don't think I didn't have any per diem items.
I'm planning to go to the Whatcom meetings, but those are covered already. I don't have any other ones.
I just thought I'd mention it because we talked about it.
And the Public Power Council, we'll add that
Okay.
to the list of.
Yeah.
Okay, oh
Oh,
great,
gotcha.
okay. Good to know.
Yeah, I'm just double checking since John asked the question, and then I'll later regret not Yeah, yeah, no, I have nothing in my calendar. That would be an issue. So should we move on to the public comment?
We don't have anybody in person who wants to speak.
Jamie Douglas.
Looks like, yeah, Jamie Douglas's hand is up.
Great, Jamie, please go ahead.
Hey, Mike, can you turn Jamie on? Mike McComber? Thanks. We'll get to Jamie in just a second, that's all.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Thursday.
Yeah.
Thinking about next steps, I think it's appropriate to wait till after Thursday to talk about next steps. I have lots of thoughts about next steps. And of course, commissioners are doing our homework and understanding the supply landscape on in the Pacific Northwest. So I'm looking forward to having a follow-up. And I guess it's not on the we haven't discussed the next meeting agenda, but probably a recap on the April 13th meeting this week would make sense to have that on the agenda for our next meeting.
Okay. And one thing, if you guys have any comments that you want for anything you want to know from our consultant on Thursday, that's the time for you to ask. So, I mean, it's not just that you want to be passive audience members. If there's something you want to know from our consultant, that's the perfect time. And then the public will hear the answer to the question too.
Well,
So-
I assume he'll be there, but Todd's questions that he raised in public comment in our last meeting, which were, looking at the benefits, quantifying the benefits of municipalization on the, both on the organizational or community basis and on the individual basis, is something that he asked about, and maybe having the consultant answer the question about how that could be done, or how, to what degree does the report convey that? And then I'll also mention my overarching question that I've had on this subject for many years, and that is the understanding how we solve the supply problem. What are pathways for Whatcom PD to address supply? And it's almost a study of its own. A follow-on study.
So Commissioner, it looks like Jamie is available and live with us.
Great.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much. It's great to hear that at least we can look forward to finding out about the broadband grant proposal here toward the end of the month, hoping that it doesn't get picked further along, but that's the way it is. Eric and I haven't been meeting with Chris and Andrew. We appreciated those meetings earlier, but we were waiting for the results of that proposal to move forward, engage more. Although Chris and Andrew, if you'd reach out to us, Eric is considering some things in his gated community and wanted to check with you guys about how that could be beneficial to whatever happens with broadband in his community. At any rate, I wanted to let you know that our connectivity group that has been part of TAG Northwest is moving and going to be part of the new STEM organization for Whatcom that is forming. TAG is splitting off its community groups, which our connectivity group is a part of, and that it will now be a part of this new STEM organization as they in TAG Northwest focus on being more of their traditional industry advocacy role. I also wanted to just comment, just to share on the issue of water personally. When my wife and I lived in Birch Bay, we put in 2 cisterns that collected 500 gallons of water, and we used that to mitigate the, lots of water in the wrong time and not enough during the summer to cover needs. I haven't seen lately much in the way of activity trying to encourage people to do any kinds of storage solutions like that, or other things besides cisterns, such as things that could be done on larger properties within the rural area, like Commissioner Desmania was talking about in terms of soil. But it seems like involving the community in small distributed engineered solutions that might help mitigate our water might be a part of the solution. Having those cisterns worked well for our family, and I've seen others who've done similar things like that to help provide water for their location. And I would think that that would be within keeping of, since it's water that falls on a location is then ultimately used in that same location, would work with any kind of legal decisions about water use. But I'm obviously not any expert in this. I just end here by just saying I really appreciate all that the commission is doing on broadband and water, and also looking forward to being at the open house here Thursday, seeing you in person, and hearing about the further plans that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
I don't see anybody else from the public raising their hand or anything, Commissioner.
So we have no further public comment period. We'll close the public comment period. And I think now John's going to call me on my cell phone and we'll start an executive session. Is that correct?
Yeah, can we take a 5-minute break? Or,
Sure.
yeah,
I'm showing it's
we're gonna
10:07.
say goodbye to Rick and, Okay.
So it's 10:07. So catch you at 12 after.
Sounds good.
Thank you.